If there's anybody there in the ether, welcome to you all as well. We do a YouTube and a Facebook live stream. We're so glad that you've chosen to spend your Friday evening hearing about Zack's current installation in the New Media Gallery, the Charity Stripe. My name is Dominic Cody Kramers. I'm the president on the board of Jack Straw, and that means I have the immense pleasure of welcoming you all here tonight and filling in for Levi Fuller, who couldn't be here. We're going to begin with a short land acknowledgement. Today we meet on the lands of the Duwamish, Suquamish, and Muckleshoot nations and other Coast Salish peoples, past and present. The staff, board, and artists at Jack Straw Cultural Center acknowledge that we are living, creating, working, and playing on the traditional land of the first people of Seattle and the Salish Sea, and we honor them and the land itself with deep gratitude. We also want to recognize and thank our institutional funders who are so instrumental in making all of the art happen here. The U District Partnership, Seattle Office of Arts and Culture, For Culture, Washington State Arts Commission, the National Endowment for the Arts, Arts Fund, and the Lester and Phyllis Epstein Foundation. And of course, we also want to especially thank individual contributors like you all, maybe, who we couldn't do this kind of work without. The Jack Straw Residency Program, which hosts the New Media Gallery and programs like Zack, is funded from you all and these institutional folks. And I would kind of be remiss without saying that right now all of the COVID funding and governmental funding for opening after COVID is kind of gone and done. And so Jack Straw made really good use of that and relied on that to keep the doors open. And so at this point, we really rely on some individual contributions as well. So if you are so inclined, you can go on our website, jackstraw.org, and make a donation. Any donation of any amount is totally welcome. Let's see, if you're interested in further experience of the Charity Stripe, there's going to be a free hands-on youth and family workshop about the installation on July 8th from 2 to 4 right here at Jack Straw, and it's also going to be audio described for the visually impaired. If you'd like to attend that, you can register on the website, jackstraw.org again. Applications for the next round of artist residencies will be coming this summer and then due in the fall, so keep an eye out for that if you're interested. Info will be on the website and in our email newsletters as well. And if you are on social media, check out Jack Straw Cultural Center on Facebook and Instagram, and like us and follow us, so get the word out to other people. And finally, I'd like to give a shout out to our fabulous, talented audio, video, and web stream engineers tonight, Ayesha and Daniel. Big hand for them for making this happen. And without further ado, Zack Bent.
Thanks, Dominic. Howdy.
Hi.
This is a living room of friends and family, and so I'm glad to have you all here tonight. Thanks for peeling away part of sacred, sunny Seattle Friday afternoon to be with me and to hear about the project I've been working on. Thanks to Jack Straw. This is my second time being here. It's about 9 years ago. I think Dominic and I were kind of peeling it back. I think it's about 9 years ago since I did an installation here. So this is my second round, and I felt like, man, is it too soon to apply again? But that's what happens when you start getting older. That's like 10 years is some time. So without further ado, I'm going to kind of walk you through some of the history of my projects, sort of why the projects are built the way they're built, and then talk a lot about the process of how this project was created in general. So, and also it's relatively intimate in here, so if you're like the kind of person who wants to ask questions and you want to break the lecture style of what I'm up to, you can feel free to raise your hand or poke me. So. All right, so I'd start with my home base. This is where a lot of my projects have found their beginning, and I moved to Seattle in 2006 with my family. At the time, my wife and amazing co-conspirator, Gayla Bent, And we came with one child, and she was very pregnant at the time, and I was going to go to graduate school. And up to that point, I had made what I would call like photographs that were relatively conceptually oriented, that dealt with spiritual themes, relatively metaphysical in their approach. Were illustrative, kind of idea-generated pictures, and also dimensional in scale. So I get to Seattle, and I don't have the friends that I could call on to make my work with me. I have a spouse and a baby, and I would go to graduate seminars, and then I would come home, and I'd be like, my help is here. And particularly the theater that I was creating out of thin air, like this piece on the left, it just wasn't as feasible, and my interest sort of fell into the space of the home. And this is what our life kind of looked like. I would be doing commercial work in the middle of the room. I've got a kid strapped into a chair in the kitchen, Solomon and Ezra in a pack and play. And I remember thinking, I need to take this picture because it's probably going to end up in an artist talk someday. And you can see this is immediately how the work started to bend. It was home with a twist, and home was the place that I mined, both for its rituals, the way we played and acted and considered what it meant to both be parents, to have children, and then just the sort of everyday banal activities that are happening around a home. So there are works like this. This is like clearing out a bedroom, having a piles of laundry, and then staging a shoot with my youngest son at the time. My oldest son at the time, Ezra. And a little bit of costuming. So there's some sort of threads here just to initiate with you as you get into this project, the Charity Stripe. And he became my muse at the time. I would costume him. We were both like scientists, and would stage set the living room, sometimes with just a single prop or some sort of activity where I knew that it would generate pictures. I didn't know what those pictures would be like. There was a great sense of chance and play that would happen inside of making the pictures. And I was often trying to change the roles, that I would be the one immature and he would be the one mature. So what's it like to kind of take on a childlikeness as an adult and let the kid become the one who's the boss? And so he's running the office. It's maybe not going very well at the time. Then at the time, for me, I really started to sink my teeth into what it was to make a photograph. I had went to school to study architecture, and so I was really a spatial maker. I made images that would inhabit space that someone would experience. As my mentor Paul Perger would say, that they were illustrations and they just really were kind of thin in his estimation often, and it made me go like, well, what is a photograph? How is it supposed to work? And I got to the place where, for me, the photograph, what I loved about it was that it was both a fiction and a nonfiction simultaneously, and my work has kind of stayed in that vein in any project I've worked on, both video or photo. And enduring from that point, I'm really interested in the space where we both know that it is both an act and it's also both true. And it's, to me, a lot like our lives in general, that we're both like acting and we're performing something real at the same time and trying to figure out as we go. So photographs are a great place to make that. This picture, he's again doing the job that I should be doing, cutting my hair, and drop of blood running down my ear. And as kind of at a short aside, we'll see how the time rolls. I ran into my mentor, Paul Berger, at the barbecue recently, and he said, "There's that one picture you made with the blood on the." So he was like, he thought of this as like this sacred religious painting. He was like, you made this religious piece. It just seemed like something really happened there. And I said, Paul, that was the moment where I arrived at graduate school. Paul liked a work of mine, because as my colleague Aaron knows, Paul does not like works, and maybe Eric, you experienced that as well, stand with Paul. It's hard to get Paul to kind of buy into something you made, or that he thought it was transformative. And for me, it was like, this is the center where the piece, this is the piece I've been asked about most of my life. Like, did that really happen? And the answer is, I'm not going to tell you. So it does have plenty of fiction inside of it. So we continue on with this costuming, and we're taking on kinds of roles and rituals. We move into like being a tribe of scouts and galas, a ready participant. This is at an elementary school next to our home. And I'm starting to think a little bit at this point about being a father, what it means to raise children, what it means to have sort of ideas around the patriarchal, the matriarchal. What is it? What am I handing down as a father? What is beautiful? And I grew up as a Boy Scout, and it's both like I think of it as sort of a beautiful institution that's also really complicated, has a lot of cultural complications through its history. But one of the things that's really wonderful about it is that boys in a tribe, in a troop, it's just like a tribe, you actually do a lot of soft skills that would have been traditionally done by mothers that they do for each other. They sew each other's clothes, they cook for each other. And it's somewhat militaristic in a way, so that's one of the things that comes with it. We're surviving together, but there is a lot of tenderness that happens there, and a lot of care for even, say, a wound, how to dress someone's wound. In this project, we had a lot of wound dressing and things that had to deal with bandaging, tending one another. At the time, I was reading this book by a guy, Jay Meckling, who wrote about the Scouts, and he described that, in this quote, that the Latin root of the word conspiracy is to breathe together, and he suggests that social reality is a conspiracy between the participants. And I just thought I'd think about that a lot. Like when you have a family, you have a conspiracy that you're sharing. We're conspiring to do this thing together. What does it look like? And so it just continued on working and traveling through these projects together. Much more of my architecture background started to come into work. This is a homemade Lincoln log cabin at full scale, and we did a performance with Ezra and Solomon at the time. And inside this gallery, I tried to have them direct how we would build this Lincoln log cabin together, and it went very poorly. They just were not really good at the task. So it was a wonderful experience working with them, and I started to think a lot about, at the time, my work being like a 3D version of a film, that you would get inside of it, that there would be an activated moment, that there was something that was a bunch of components coming together to make a whole. This work at the time, I wouldn't say it wasn't poorly received or anything, it just wasn't seen. And I started to have a lot of doubts about what it meant to be a father and to have my sons in art practice with me, and whether that was good for them. Ezra's getting ready to go to kindergarten. This is like moving on from kindergarten, or getting ready to go to. And in the process of doing that, I just left it all behind. I started making architectural installations, and I taught a short workshop at Photo Center Northwest. And during that workshop, I was practicing teaching people about how to make work around their homes. And I was reminded of all these amazing artists who work with their families and their homes. And I was like, the hell with this. I'm just going to keep doing it. Hopefully I don't ruin their lives. Like, we'll just go back to it. It's really interesting. And this was a kind of a short break. This was 2010 and 2015. We started to work on a project together where we were going to this forest fire outside of Cleo. So they all look happy. Hopefully that this isn't like, none of them came tonight because they're teenagers and they're done. They're not on the clock. I lost them all one by one. Are you coming? No. Are you coming? No, I'm going to work. Are you coming? No, I can't do this anymore. Okay. So this is Solomon in the back, Casper in the front, and Ezra. And they really have journeyed with me. We go to do these projects together, and we work as collaborators. And I think during this particular project, going into this forest fire where we've been working on pictures together, it was when they crossed over from being just my little help that was around, that I would kind of say, hey, come over here and grab this and hold this, to actually being collaborators with me. They come with certain kinds of ideas. They push and pull what we might do inside of a landscape. And in this landscape, we drag a series of sculptures and objects and perform photographic myths with one another. The land itself was burned in 2014, and so every year it regenerates just a little bit, and as it's regenerating, they regenerate a little bit into these new, bigger bodies. So we have been going on and off to this site for those, I guess, 7 years, and it's not super regular, but regular enough to have consistency. Roll through just some of these images to show you what they're like. They're just like a little bit on the edge of feral. It's hard to tell if like what is happening is good or safe for them. The hair cutting has happened again. This is Ezra now cutting his brother's hair, so this is called the bloodline continues. He's continuing on the task. Maybe he's cutting him, maybe not. And particularly during this kind of the middle phase of this, around, let's see, what do I have the right year on this? This is, around 17, 18 is when I really did start to see them as actors, and these two pieces are titled such. This one is Some Actors Resembling Children I Know, and this one is called Some Children Resembling Actors I Know. See, this one to kind of give a taste of the span of working with my three sons, the delight of working with them. They're really wonderful. This is most recent. This is Ezra at 17. This was him at 10 when we first were in this forest fire together. The trees you can see in the back corner have been cut down, and the deer hang that was originally there is left. And he had to get a new pair of pants. I'm not sure where from. It's not as much ribs in the new him. All right, so getting into the project that you're going to be able to see if you haven't seen already in the gallery, Charity Stripe. This project started with my interest in basketball. My interest is the religion I grew up with in southern Indiana called basketball. And it's like, that's about the best way to put it. It's very religious, and think people from Arkansas who think about football like that. But everything in small town Indiana really revolves around the culture of basketball, and hoops are everywhere. So I just started to notice basketball hoops and think about them as these like sad, dying creatures that had been left and were untended. They were not to be played, not been played with for a while. Called them lonely hoops. I think the project, I've still photographed them as like the kids are all gone now, or no one's home anymore. It's kind of starting to lean that way, because that's what happens. I had a lonely hoop at my house. People stop shooting on it, and then it just sits there, and especially in the Northwest, the weather hits it and they deteriorate and start to fall. So these are some collections from mostly around Seattle, one on the right in Oregon. So I'm collecting these hoops. This is around 2015, and thinking about long term, is there a project that is I could wrap up around basketball? And at our house, it's not just that we are costuming for art projects, we're also costuming for Halloween. And so the actors are they're acting. They like to act. And like I said, it was around 2015. I realized, like, okay, they're really here for me. They're up for whatever. And I don't know. I maybe, yeah. So they got Macklemore in the middle. When Macklemore was hot during 2015, I think. Was that when Seattle won the Super Bowl? Or was it 14? Something like that. But they love to be in front of the camera and play, and so I was like, okay, I've for a long time thought there might be a possibility of doing a project around basketball, and I didn't know exactly the road into it. So this is a project where, for me, it's really been kind of unclear on how to do it, which I've been holding on to it for a long time. 2018, I had these mascot heads made by artist Eden Colbo, and asked her, will you make me a mascot head of the three most popular collegiate teams, which are the Eagle, the Bulldog, and the Tiger. So I wanted the mascots that were the best. They were the winners, so that they could become kind of the losers. And this is in 2018, and give you a sense of, we gave him a whirl, and I was like, this is going to be great. And the only thing that's changed from this picture to the installation is the Bulldog and the Tiger swapped. Casper has retained the Eagle. So you can tell already with this project, I feel like the forest fire is really it's kind of, I mean, it's dark. It's a dead place, but it's rejuvenating. It's like hope underneath the surface of a lot of ash. Like you're like, this is kind of, it's becoming something. It's really beautiful. And sometimes raising children feels like that too. Like, you've pushed me far. Is it possible that something good is coming up underneath here? But this project really was about the idea of playing with what it means to celebrate, what is a possibility of bringing that joy to more of a place at the surface, but also continuing on with themes of vulnerability, pathos, and community. What does it mean to not just work autonomously, but with others? So this is, we lost, it was 2018, so 5 years later, they're not the little boys that were dancing anymore, but I was hopeful that they still would dance for me. They're very much willing. They're willing, especially because they get paid hourly. It does help. But they're not here, but I'm so grateful. I mean, I'll say like, hey, we're going to shoot on Saturday. Can you peel that time away? They will. They'll set it aside. And Solomon, because he's the middle child, he'll always say like, you don't have to pay me. It's fine. You don't have to, it's all good. Dad, it's okay. And I'm like, no, I'm going to pay you. He's like, no, it's okay. It's cool. He's very much the middle child in that way. The project was built out of two particular sections, one being this gymnasium and one being a stage. I wanted to stick with the themes of that the work was completely a fiction, that they were practicing for some unknown event that was happening, but that both stages were truly stages. It wasn't just a gymnasium, but it was just a fake place for them to kind of practice what they were up to. The theater in itself also being a stage for them to practice their dancing. And this particular chunk of the video, you'll notice there's two videos in installation. One of them is of the gymnasium and one is in a theater. And the gymnasium one is rooted in a series of works that kind of got me back into working with my children in 2015. Having these videos, I was interested in was the possibility of having a video that was both kind of a still photograph as much as it was a video. And through these three videos, I'll show you a few chunks of. There are figurative elements, but the figures become photographs for as much long as possible as they can. It almost seems like not much is happening inside of the inside of the videos. There's just a lot of quietness, typically the sound from the space itself. And these are relatively fun to make in a process sense, in that we would go into large landscapes and I would ask my sons to be as still as possible, which is really hard for a young boy. This one was made in Czech Republic, and this, I think it's wheat. What do you remember what the field is, Gail? Like,
yeah, it's some kind of grain.
Yeah.
I don't remember which grain.
Casper's really bad at this one. He just, you can hear some bugs, and I mean, it was. I should pay them in retrospect for this. This was before payments were happening. They were on like you're in Europe payroll.
Zack, where are you when these? Are you right behind the camera?
Yeah, and we'll just do arrangements. I was thinking a lot about Andrew Wyatt's painting, pastoral paintings where I have figures lay in the painting. I'd be like, okay, let's arrange this as a painting, and then you stay there. Okay, bend your shoulder a little bit, and then you just feel the antsiness, you know. And I'm actually watching this in a little bit because I haven't seen it in a while, and it only got shown once at Soil Art Gallery, but I really enjoyed making this piece. One thing I'll note with this one as well, and you'll see that there is a little bit more of a filmic quality to the two pieces on display here at Jack's Draw, and that one of them actually has a bit of a story. Like you can watch it and you can see that one mascot is having a hard time, and that becomes a prevalent theme for him. We're actually going to make a short film out of this, but this started to be really the piece where, okay, everyone's hanging in the field, and it made sense for it to endure, but there's a hunting shack that they were going up and down in. So this possibly could have a film-like quality at another time. So we had that work, and then this one called that one was called Still Not Still, and this one's called Still Not Still Still. You're so kind, Gila. You lived with me for a long time. Yeah, there's a humorous side to the photographing and the burn. These videos were probably the closest thing to humor there. I kept trying to get them to stop in midair, but your body doesn't allow you to do that. I tend to be a perfectionist with images, both video and photo, get into the weeds of making something look really clean and pristine. But these moments of failure where they're not doing the thing well are the way for me to leak that sense of failure into pieces, and to have that human element, I think, that is a little bit more beautiful than something I could contain or control on my own. So in these works that you see, if you haven't seen them already, there are these confetti pours, and the confetti pours model this idea of stillness. So like the mascot that's getting poured on is frozen in their perfect world where they're getting practiced being poured on, and when they're getting poured on, they're being poured by their rival, the rival's color. You know, it's not really a celebration. It's sort of like, screw you, you know, a little like you're a losing mascot. And this is one of the tiger. But in the midst of this, while they also then they go to a world where it's an idealized self, where they're actually getting their own confetti, and perhaps in a dream get a more beautiful mascot life. I'm still trying to figure this thing out for myself. Like on Instagram, I think I said this, but Casper, he came out one day and I was editing, he's like, this is the weirdest thing we've ever made. Yes, it is. Yeah, I understand, son. All that stage was in the gymnasium, and there is more narrative with it, so when you see it, you'll be able to see the passage of particularly the eagle and the eagle's experience of being kind of the most sad mascot and being comforted by the other mascots who decide, you know, maybe we don't have to be rivals, we can love one another. This portion of the video was photographed at Cornish at the Raisbeck Theater with Gayla on hand and Yao Nguyen, who helped with the video work. And we made these videos to hype songs, so sports hype songs. So this is We Will Rock You, Eye of the Tiger, some more.
There it is.
YMCA.
Let the dogs out.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then we got back to the studio and I was like, I gotta get all the sound out of here. I don't want this, but we really wanted some footsteps. So I'll show you my Foley artist making footsteps in a second. Sorry, Gayla.
That's all right.
So they were silent, and then for just the goofiness of it, we thought we would let's see if we can bring back in a sonic experience. And so Gayla went back and watched all the videos of the dances and made Foley for me, stomping, and Foley / field recordings in the theater.
Sick moves. It's all about the sound. It's all about the sound.
Sorry.
So good.
What I originally had intended for the video, and I ran into problems because I was talking with Levi here at Jack Straw about copyright material. The original the original soundtracks were supposed to be several hype songs all together. So we've got Jay-Z, we've got Queen, we've got Gary Glitter, we've got them all. They're right here in Premiere, crushed together. But you still can hear enough to where I think we get out of fair use space. Like, so we're like, okay, this is not really gonna work. They're gonna sound like still those songs. And when I make millions of dollars off this project and I have to sell it someday, I don't really want to have to pay Jay-Z, you know. Anyways, Levi's like, this is probably not a really great idea. So we have let's see if I can get the next slide here. Good job, Greta. So instead, what we're able to do was layer together stomp, stomp, clap field recordings, which my students at SPU did for me. So we did those in a gym, and then Gayla did some as well. And wild enough, that is not copyrightable. You can't copyright stomp, clap. So Queen wins nothing there. So it doesn't belong to them. And we get to use that. And what I did with the videos was really just try to layer that up and build something rhythmic for someone who's not a musician but could try to play one a little bit. And then to replicate a hype song, I hired guitarist Cole Valenti to make a version of We Will Rock You, but he did the melody, or how did he do it? Did the melody backwards?
Yeah. He took the solos and he played them backwards.
He played them backwards.
And then did all of his own kind of.
Yeah, so when you hear the guitar solos in there, he gave me 3 minutes of a mind-melting guitar soloing. So this is all gymnasium bouncing, clapping. You can kind of hear the We Will Rock You. BMI won't come after us. Alright, so it gives you a taste of that. And kind of a last minute choice was to let these sounds commingle together, that both kinds of practices would lay over one another, that when the mascots are having their actualized moments, when they're becoming fully who they are in the gym, they're like seeing their possibility of who they could be. They're also at the same time in the theater going from just dancing alone quietly to having some sonic blast that comes from heaven to kind of lays on top of them. You know? And we can hear just a little bit of how that works. Some of the field recordings as well are my students were also making cheering for the Eagles, cheering for the Bulldogs, and for the Tigers. And of the 6 students who were helping me, they all had a high school that had one of those mascots, if that tells you anything. They really are the mascots that win all. How many of you had an eagle as a mascot? No one? Tiger? Bulldog? Oh, there we go.
Garfield?
Garfield? How are we doing on time, Daniel?
I think we're doing just fine.
Okay. Okay, I'm going to just briefly talk about the squeaker box and its lineage of projects that I've done over a number of years. When I start to put these together and stack them, it's kind of strange to me how often I have a contained thing. I'm going to call it that, a sculptural element, a space, a box that has a sonic quality to it, that is mute, that has no way in or out of it. And the squeaker box is the one that's the light's trying to find its way out. If you've seen it at this point, it's a perforated box, a Jordan sneaker box that has light pouring out of it and the sound of squeaking. from the courts. These two pieces, when I was in architecture school, I kind of come back to. I was trained as an architect, but I was like thinking like an artist the whole time I was there. So these particular works by Etienne Boulez, the cenotaph for Isaac Newton, and Coupe Himmelblau, this piece called Wrestle-Sphere. The one on the right, they were testing the limits of, what's the term? I think I have it. Like pneumatic sculpture or structure where it's filled with air. It's a membrane, so they would travel around Vienna rolling in this ball. So they're in the architecture slash sculpture. And then Boulez's cenotaph for Isaac Newton was a piece of paper architecture. It was an idealized space to honor Newton post-death. And it's often thought of as like the first place where architecture is about concept and not about form or functionality. That architecture could be about an idea. And there I was in architecture school just dealing with ideas. By the time I started to practice, I realized that working on red lines on drawings was not for me, but thinking about architectural ideas was more accurate. So I'm going to kind of breeze through these projects. These are being at home, making the makeshift sculptures, architecture. A lot of us have probably lived through versions of this as a kid. This one has like an earthly channel that gets you to someplace out of it. And this is a project called Home on the Range, where my family lived in a gallery for a week, and we built this covered wagon together. It's tent sculpture. Again, kind of the permeable sculpture, but also a really contained space that kind of has entry and exit, but doesn't necessarily feel like it's there's an easy way to get in or out of it. Almost something that you would have to kind of puncture to move your way through. This is a project called Rockwood that had 3 itinerant music projects, compositions that were put in them. 2 of them performances. One of them was a recording by Nat Evans, Jessica Kinney, and Ivan Kong, and Helado Negro. So there was 3 different sites, and in each of those sites there were different performances that happened at this tent. One at night where it was lit up, one during the day where there was just sound emanating from it. You could go into it, but should you? Was maybe the question. And then this is a project that I did here at Jack Straw 9 years ago. I encountered this camper shell that was on top of these bricks that some gentleman had made in his backyard, and I saw it from the street, and I was like, wow, who's the guy who made that thing? And so I riffed off of it and made my own version of it, which is 10 feet tall and had this camper shell on top of it, emanating sound. It seemed like something eventful is occurring inside of this kind of creature of a sculpture. Well, this video has the sounds of this boat traveling. Maybe. It's quite a bit more loud in installation, but there would be sounds of the boat rocking, crows going through the space. This was almost activated like a large drum. And particularly this sculpture to cycle back to Boulez's big cenotaph, which I think is really scary, even though it's quite beautiful, as this piece of paper architecture, something that was never built. The pieces are a little bit handling like just personal fear, psychological fear, ideas about the sublime, what it means to encounter heaviness, to live with it, to have it situated around you. And so this sculpture, this is called the Sublime Generator, that it had sound in it, and the sound was actually recycled into this work, this Sublime Generator 2. This was the creaking, so on the opposite wall from this were the kids going through the dust and freezing, so that sound was both in this sculpture on the wall. It was about 7 feet in diameter. You kind of go up to it and you're like, should I look in that? I don't know. Is that a good idea? That's the way I think about it anyway. And I brought it to the gallery that I showed at the time, and it was not stained yet, and the gallerist was like, I really like it like that. I'm like, well, I'm sorry, it's going to be black. It needs to have a little bit of some like sort of doom to come with it. Oh, I do actually have a slide that shows the other side of this room and the dust kick. While maybe not a direct connection to the piece that you're going to see in there is some play from these 2 works. Where I grew up in Indiana, this Vito Acconci piece is in the Indianapolis Museum of Art. It's called Round Trip, A Space to Fall Back On, where he reorientates a room, so it sort of changes how you see the room. His quote about the piece is, he said, "I want to put the viewer on shaky ground so that they have to reconsider themselves and their circumstances." And then we have Robert Morris's piece, I always get the title wrong, Box with the Sound of Its Own Making, where in this kind of modern minimalist piece, it's the sound of making the boxes inside of the box. So when you see it in person, it sounds like saws, hammers, building the thing itself. When you get into the space and you encounter this piece, this is what it kind of plays off of. It's a box with the sound of its own making. It's an Air Jordan box. It's fully perforated, so to let you behind the curtain. And inside of it has a series of LED lights that illuminate out of those perforations. In the box, the sound of its own making, which is a lot of squeaking. And those were done at different gymnasiums, just doing field recordings to capture with a boom mic just the up close sound of the squeaking of sneakers. I had a friend a few years ago watching March Madness, and she was like, "My husband watches this basketball and the sneakers, they're just killing me. I hate this sport." And I realized that it was like mother's milk to me. I was like, "Oh, the squeaking, I love it." So this is Squeaker Box, and box with the sound of its own making. So if you haven't experienced it yet, you'll get a chance to see it. The video in there runs about 8 minutes, and durationally after that, it goes to credits, and then there's about 2 minutes of the Squeaker Box going. So you have to sit with the sound of actual basketball, not just an imagined world where mascots are becoming themselves. So that's the project. Thanks for listening. Appreciate y'all coming out. Anybody have questions, curiosities?
Did you script the narrative of this piece beforehand, or did you? Yeah.
That's a good question. Yeah, if you like those other video art pieces I've shown, they're often really static and there's not much narrative. And I had a collection in the gym of all of these tropes that I would say that would happen in the gym, both like by players and for mascots. Like, oh, we need a little bit of trampoline. Like, oh, we should do a pour. And by the time you have all these things, they come together. I'm like, well, there's more story here. So then we started to have story, and I think I can safely share this. But my youngest, we were like, one of our shoots, he's like, I hate this. I hate sports. Why are we? Like, this was supposed to be fun. And I'm like, I'm so sorry. I know. But can you just go open that door over there? But yeah, he was having a really hard time with it. And so when I got home, I just changed. We did one more shoot, and I bent it to letting him be not good at sports and having a hard time. And so I told him, I was like, look, you became the foil for the piece. Like, it's just not going your way. You're having a really bad time being a mascot. And he was like, that makes more sense now. Because he's really the dancer, so he liked that part of things. And he actually was the only one who choreographed his dance. We got to the place where we're going to, the theater, and I was like, did you guys all choreograph your pieces? What songs are you going to do? And like, he was the only one. He was like, I got my whole, like, We Will Rock You thing down. I was like, oh. He had practiced it for like a few weeks, hadn't he? Yeah. So yeah, but actually the narrative built itself. I thought there would probably be more static pieces where we're just dancing and then these pours facing each other. But it was kind of fun to just let the story play itself out, more delightful. Yeah. Good question, Eric.
Hey, so I'm curious, the early work, I've just realized is you're present, you're in the work.
Yes.
And then with the spires or in the work with the burn, or maybe it changed before that, but that seemed like.
Yeah, well, I was a little bit there, yeah.
But then you drift away.
Yeah.
I was curious about that. Was that some sort of consciously, or was it that they were like becoming more performative and more themselves, and you could kind of let them take it?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it's probably natural, but perhaps like. I think it was a little bit natural. I'm not necessarily sure that I wanted to be in the pieces as much, and their personalities came to the surface. They had like more energy themselves, but I probably will sit with that one. I'm not sure why am I not in there as much anymore? But yeah, I drifted out, It's also, there was a lot of years where we were like setting a self timer on an old film camera, you know, that's like goes zzz, like running, you know, like could get down in the dirt. It was really hard. It's actually harder to be in the pieces than it is to actually just make them, to direct. Yeah. Yeah, I think probably just the three characters moving on has been kind of interesting over time. Anybody else?
I'm curious. I love how much you focus on family and fatherhood and like children growing up. What's gonna happen as your children start to, like, I know Ezra's.
Yeah, I know.
Like, have you thought about that from like not just the parenthood perspective, but the artistry? Like,
Yeah.
what happens?
That's a good question. I've been asked that question for like 15 years.
Yeah. You have an answer.
I don't every year it's like, well, I guess we'll do one more thing, you know. But Ezra's going to art school, and so I think he's going to come back and be like, hey, can you stand over? Or maybe I'll go back in. Gayla said the other day, she was like, you have collaborated enough on these things that you can put them on your resume. You know, from probably 2015 on, he's participated enough. In particular this piece, we were doing the pours. This is where the collaborative element comes in. He's like, we have to do all the cleanup. Like, that's like the whole thing. Like, you know, we're so pathetic, and like, so who's gonna clean up? Like, we need to see that side of the labor. I was like, okay, kid, like, you got it. You know, it's like, let's keep going. So like, we spent a lot of time like getting the brooms out and cleaning up the mess of doing the mascot work. So maybe he'll come back and cue things up. Otherwise, will just like photograph basketball. I'm thinking about my like Twilight artist years. I'm like with a little Leica around my neck. Well, I guess we'll cross that bridge when it comes. Casper, I still have around for a minute. Yes,
There
Mom.
could be grandchildren
I don't know. That would be that could be a problem.
Ways away, but yes.
I didn't show a video that Gayla and we made a photo piece together when she was in graduate school in New York. It was in 1998, and then we made a family version of it in 2000, 25 years later.
Mm-hmm.
And when we made that, we said, we'll make this again in another 25 years.
Oh, okay.
So,
That's
so I've done 20, I've got like 15 more years.
Okay.
That's a great question. Yeah. Thank you all for coming. Appreciate it. All right. And those on the internet, bye bye. Right, Daniel?